Formula One was better in the past. More enjoyable, more competitive, and requiring a broader set of skills of both drivers and engineers. It was exciting because there was an element of jeopardy about driving the cars. Not because drivers might get injured, but because running off the road meant a retirement, a loss of time, or another penalty, served by the laws of physics, not by some adjudicator sat in their ivory tower. Drivers were free to race, and we didn't have to endure the endless whining of a group of spoilt kids playing something which looks and feels like a PlayStation game. When I say Formula One is no longer real, here are all the reasons why. Today's cars are almost completely reliant upon aerodynamics and downforce. In earlier eras, aerodynamics were important, though they were less refined, allowing for closer racing and more frequent overtaking. Computational fluid dynamics, which uses technology to analyse airflow around and through objects, has become king. However, all teams are putting their equations into effectively the same computer program and getting the same results. If you strip the paint and sponsor logos from the current generation of cars, I doubt even the team that made them could tell them apart. Given that aerodynamics have become about who has the better computer, Formula One would be well advised to reduce the number of aerodynamic aids on a car and focus more heavily on mechanical grip, which would allow for cars to run closer together and make overtaking on the track more of an option. There is no longer a mechanical link between the driver and the engine or gearbox. Even the rear wheels are braked by wire. All of these inputs can be moderated by technology to make the driver look better than they are. The only thing a driver actually does without any electronic assistance is apply the front brakes. When I talk about Formula One turning into a PlayStation game, this is what I mean. The best driver is not currently determined by the ability to do amazing things with the car, rather the one who gets to grips with the software best. The team whose software loadout is more effective than the others. Electronic and adjustable power steering, gear changes by buttons on the wheel, electronic throttles, brake-by-wire, all are open to software intervention to override errors. Onboard videos of drivers of previous eras is rare, but does exist. They show just how physically challenging driving these cars was. Just changing gear around a lap was more challenging than the whole Formula One driving experience today. Crash gearboxes with a physical clutch and mechanical gear lever required skill to use. Never mind doing so 50 or 60 times a lap around a circuit like Monaco, with purely manual brakes and steering, and a throttle whose only traction control was provided by the driver's brain and right foot working together. This is part of the reason why drivers make so few mistakes these days. They're doing so much less than their predecessors. It's hard to miss a gear change when all it requires is the press of a button. Impossible to over-rev an engine because of a missed shift. Gone, as a result, are the challenges with making a car reliable and fast through a whole race. Mechanical components have to last several races and are therefore run far from their operational limits. A car running at 90% or less of its capacity is hardly ever going to fail in comparison to one that runs at 100% of its capability for a whole race. With the loss of mechanical failures, we have also lost the element of suspense. Drivers who had a feel for their machinery and who could be both quick and kind are no longer valued. The homogenisation of cars in recent years goes beyond just the aerodynamics. Regulations have increasingly standardised aspects of the cars, leading to less differentiation between the teams. Tyres are now sourced from a single supplier, reducing competition and the ability of competing manufacturers to innovate in what should be a key area of performance differentiation. In the past, there was more variety in the design of cars, tyre and engine performance, aerodynamic capabilities, all of which meant that there was almost always some degree of uncertainty over who would be competing for victory come race day. With a single tyre supplier, modern Formula One races are often focused heavily on tyre management, with drivers needing to conserve tyres over a race and sometimes being dozens of seconds off their qualifying pace. Strategy becomes the watchword, not competition. In contrast, drivers of the past pushed their cars to the limit throughout races, and with the loss of refuelling, teams cannot even differentiate based on the average weight of the car compared to the penalty of extra pit stops. The move towards hybrid power units has once more made technology more important than engineering. As well as taking away the purity from engine manufacture, the sound of modern cars is anemic. The loss of raw animal power, which a grid of full-bore engines of different designs, shapes and induction brought, has made a modern Grand Prix quite tame in comparison to its predecessors. Modern cars have turbos to boost efficiency, whereas the turbos of the 80s were all about adding another dimension in power, noise and unpredictability. The introduction of DRS showed just how far down the wrong road the Formula One organisation was prepared to go in the name of entertainment. Rather than planning out an overtaking manoeuvre several corners in advance and then executing it with bravery and skill, drivers can now line up behind their opponent, safe in the knowledge that as soon as they hit a DRS zone, they can breeze past and get the overtake done long before arriving at the corner. No skill required. Then there is the introduction of the safety car, which effectively turns Formula One into a game of chance. Something demonstrated when the Renault team tipped the scales heavily in their favour with Crashgate in Singapore 2008. In effect, the safety car allows the race to be reset in such a way as to disadvantage some drivers and provide an unfair assistance to others. In the past, if an accident or conditions absolutely warranted it, the race was stopped and restarted, with the aggregate times from the two parts of the race being used to determine the result. Yes, it made it more difficult for casual observers when the car in the lead on the road was actually in second or third place in the race, but at least it was a fair and just system. The safety car's use needs to be rethought if it is to remain part of the Formula One experience. Maintaining the aggregate times before and after the safety car is introduced, and closing the pit lane to all cars whilst it is on track, would at least maintain the semblance of justice in the race result. Certainly, Formula One should never be in a position where the travesty of Abu Dhabi 2021 can ever happen again. Pit-to-car radios are another ridiculous introduction of the modern era. Not only do we get to hear exactly how much coaching and management goes from the pit wall to the driver, but we also hear all of the childish nonsense which spews from the drivers' mouths as they moan like primary school children about each other. Miss, Fernando is colouring outside the lines. Miss, Esteban keeps getting in my way. Miss, Lewis has taken the ball I want. It's nothing short of an embarrassment. Get rid of the radios and have the drivers actually think for themselves for a change. Or to quote the legendary Kimi Raikkonen, just leave me alone, I know what I'm doing. Off the track, the sport has become a slave to commercialisation, with significant influence from sponsors and media companies. It is more of a business and entertainment product than a sport, with decisions being driven by commercial rather than sporting considerations. The closed-shop, franchise-driven structure means that Formula One is no longer a meritocracy, where teams could enter the sport and climb their way through the field by being better than their rivals. As a result, we are saddled with a field of just 20 cars, half of whom are going to score points. The sport needs to have minnows to keep the big and medium-sized fish honest. I miss the Ocellas, Arrows, Heskeths and Minardis of generations gone by. Small teams run by enthusiasts, not money men, knowing that they had no hope of winning, but doing it for the love of the sport all the same. Who can forget those days when the smaller teams achieved miraculous results? James Hunt winning for Hesketh in 1975, Piercarlo Ghinzani's 5th place for Osella at Dallas in 1984, Damon Hill's near victory for Arrows in 1997, Luca Badoer's new miss for 4th place for Minardi at the Nürburgring in 1999. With the current closed shop enforced by the Formula One teams, we wouldn't have seen success stories like Williams, which entered Formula One in 1977 and had won 3 World Championships by 1987. We wouldn't have seen stories like Jordan's or Stewart's, and we would have no Red Bull racing team at all today. More than that, the current style of racing and the regulations favour only a single style of driver. Whilst I imagine that Michael Schumacher or Ayrton Senna would have risen to the top even in this era, more thoughtful, smooth and cerebral drivers like Prost, Stewart and Reutemann would have struggled, even if they had made any impression at all. It is interesting to note that Formula One's declining popularity was reversed, not by changes to the cars or the races, but by the introduction of Netflix's Drive to Survive docudrama, which reduces Formula One to the setting for a talking head, fly-on-the-wall type of reality show which has almost nothing to do with the racing, suggesting that new fans of the sport aren't being drawn in by the gripping racing. In fact, it has been a while since the racing could even be called interesting. I don't think it would be outrageous to say that the racing is actually incidental to the money-making machine, which feeds on trumped-up drama and driver personality more than driver skill. It seems unlikely that we will ever go back to a time when racing is the reason for the Grand Prix circus to exist, and the best we can hope for is some small improvements to undo the worst of what has happened in recent years. Sadly, the new regulations planned for 2026 are headed even further in the wrong direction, something which means remembering the historic years of Formula One becomes even more important.